It's the realist.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your guy Realistic, and welcome to my tutorial vault. That's right, I'm gonna start grabbing some of my most classic tutorials over the years out of the vault and re-releasing them. That way y'all can enjoy, get your mixing and mastering skills back up. So if you find any of the information useful, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. That way this keeps showing up in your feed, and sit back and enjoy the content. So we started off with regular compressors, and now I wanted to dive in a little bit with multi-band compressors. I'm really big on using multi-band compressors when it comes to mixing vocals, and oftentimes on my chain here I'll use a multi-band compressor after the regular compressor. And what I really like about multi-band compressors is it allows us to find a frequency in the vocal that might be resonating a little too much, or might have a little bit too much low end bump, a little bit too much resonating issues in the higher mid range. And so what it will allow us to do is just compress that area. So when we set this multi-band compressor, it's only going to compress this frequency area so that we can keep this frequency area intact, uncompressed. So I like to have that a little bit because there's areas in vocals that can have a little bit of a bump to it. And so the first area that I like to focus on is this lower mid-range area, usually around 2 to 300. And so this is something that I usually like to solo the band, right? So we can really hear what that frequency sounds like. So let's go ahead and put this on a little loop here so we can really just kind of hone in and find the frequency that we want to remove. So we use a little bit of ear training, and then I'll tell you what I'm listening for.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like a Sprite can. On God's path with a bike, yeah.
So you hear this little area that we went for. It's kind of more of a lower tone. It kind of has some muffledness to it, kind of like a little low end bump. And that's the area that I really want to compress down. I don't want that in there because the vocals especially can really fight with our bass or our 808s, and they can really fight a lot with kick drums. So it's good to kind of compress those down. If you notice here, I didn't focus too much on this mid-range area because there's a lot of like really sweet areas in this vocal that I really like that I don't want to get rid of.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like a Sprite can.
So those are actually areas that are going to be really good for our mix, and we really want that in there, especially it'll allow the vocal to really have a nice soulful tone to it. And so let's go ahead and back down here to this 228 mark.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head look.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is, usually for the lower area, I like to be a little bit more aggressive than I will when we do some multi-band action up top here. But what we're going to do is we're going to set our range to about 5 dB, and then we're going to set our ratio to be 4:1. Which is already going to be set there. And then we have our knee, which is going to tell the compressor how forgiving to be. And we're going to let this be more towards hard versus soft. So we're going to bring that down just a little bit because, again, I do want the low end to be a little bit more aggressive. I'm going to do a fast attack and fast release because with compression with modern vocals, we really want to have that compressor start and end pretty fast. And then we'll set the threshold so we can average about 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like a Sprite can. On God's path with.
And by doing this, we actually make the vocal seem like it's brighter. So let's go ahead and bypass it.
Things seem smarter in my head.
And then we'll put it back in the mix.
Things seem smarter in my.
All right, and then let's listen to the vocal with all the stuff in the mix.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like.
And then we'll bypass the multi-band compressor.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like.
And then with it.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head look.
So you can hear how that cleans that up a little bit and just kind of gives a little bit more room for the other instruments. And also it makes it appear like it's brighter because we're reducing the low end frequencies. Now, another area that I like to kind of consider is this area up here in this 2 to 3K range area. Sometimes it can get a little harsh, and it's a vocal resonance that we want to reduce. Now, we do have a full chapter on vocal resonance, so if you really want to dive in and learn about vocal resonance, you should watch that. It's my least favorite frequency in the entire world, so that's why I dedicated a chapter to it. But we are talking about multi-band compressors on vocals, and so it's always good to maybe refresh, even if you've already seen that chapter or you're going to watch that chapter again. But let's go ahead and figure this out right here. It's an area that can be a little piercing or just a little too much sometimes. And for this area, I like to be a little bit more narrow. You saw that we were a little bit wider of an area, because for the low end, there's a wider area that I wanted to tame. But for this, there's really just a certain area that I'm trying to attack here. And then we'll solo it again like we did before.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head look.
So this is a good area that we don't want to compress. This is kind of an area that will probably boost with our EQ. So we're not going to focus on that area. And then up top here, there's some sweetness that we do want to keep in here.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head look.
That's that area that's really going to allow us to get that Drake feel where we can really crank it up and really get it to just cut through like a razor. So those aren't the areas. It's this 2 to 3K area. So now that you heard those, now you'll be able to hear the difference of what this is. It's more piercing and harsh.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like a Sprite can. On God's path with the bike, yeah. Things seem smarter in my head.
So you hear that's just a little bit harsher. But here's the thing, I do want to tame it, but not as much as we did for this low end. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set our range to -3, and we're going to have a little bit more of a lower ratio. We're going to have 3 to 1. But I do want the knee to be a little bit more forgiving. So that's going to tell the compressor how forgiving it needs to be. We'll stick with a fast attack and fast release here, and then we'll get a ratio to where it does about 2 dB of gain reduction when it gets a little harsh.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like a Sprite can. On God's path with the bike, yeah.
And then we'll bypass the compressor. Let's put it in the mix.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking.
And then with it.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like a Sprite can.
So now, because of this, it fits in the mix a little bit better and fights less with some of the low end information. And because of this, it feels a little bit better. It doesn't hurt the ear quite as much. Now, another place that you could consider here is sometimes this upper area here, just to tame some of the sibilant frequencies out a little bit. So what I like to do here is I like to control this area up here so we can tame the sibilant areas just a little bit. Now we do have a whole chapter on sibilance, so we go through everything that you need to know to reduce those problem areas. But since we're talking about multi-band compressors, we can touch on it a little bit. We usually use a de-esser and do some things with clip gain to reduce those sibilant areas. But what I'm going to do here is just kind of tame it just a little bit with this multi-band compressor. And so because of that, we're going to do a really light ratio, 2 to 1. And we're going to do a really forgiving knee right here. We want this to be really forgiving, so it's going to be a softer knee. And then we'll do a fast attack and fast release, but not the fastest settings, because we want it to just kind of just slowly come in and out there. That way it's not doing too much accent.
Things seem smarter in my head. Green head looking like a Sprite can. On God's path with the bike, yeah. Always got dirt on my white Vans. Girl, I'm off track. Had to let me vent, but I'm coming right back. Say you coming with when I get my first tat. Say you coming with when I get my first tat.
So what we're doing here is we're doing a gain reduction of about 2 dB each time. And you notice that I have the threshold set to where it's only really going to trigger those T's and S's, just to kind of bring those down a little bit. We could probably set our range to -3 dB right there. That way we don't have to worry about too much gain reduction happening, just in case something triggers a little too crazy here. But yeah, we're just kind of triggering that, so it just reduces every time those T's and S's come into the vocal here. So let's bypass this.
Say you coming with when I get my first tat.
And then with it.
Say you coming with when I get my first tat. Think about you, then I run it twice back. Tax.
So now because of the multiband compressor, we just have this feeling just a little bit better, and we remove some frequency problem areas that are going to fight with the mix, and now they won't fight with the mix quite as much because we were able to tame those down a little bit.
Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this tutorial. If you found it useful, be sure to like and subscribe because it does help the channel grow. When you like a video, it tells YouTube that you liked it and maybe other people will like it as well. And also be sure to check out my online mixing and mastering courses, the art of beat mixing, the art of vocal mixing, and the art of mastering, all available now. And if this video was helpful and you're looking for other videos, you can watch a video here, here, and here. All right, until next time, y'all.